Hi, in last video we added the two cluster nodes to the domain. Now in this video we will configure the actual active passive cluster. So as a prerequisites we will need a shared storage. Now our domain controller will act as a shared storage server. So we will add a role called Iscsi target in the domain controller, and through this domain controller we will present Iscsi to both the nodes. So in this setup the domain controller will also act as a storage server. So let's start. Okay, so I have the server manager. In server manager I'll go to manage, add roles and features, role based installation. I select the local server, then I expand file and storage role, and there I have the Iscsi target server. I'll click next, and install. So while this installation is going on, we will add nick cards to both the nodes. So basically we will make sure that the Iscsi traffic goes through separate dedicated nick cards. So we will need to add nick cards in all three servers, the domain controller and both nodes. So let's add them. In both the cluster nodes we will be adding two nick cards, because one nick card will be used for Iscsi traffic and the other nick card will be used for heartbeat of the active passive cluster. There is one and the other. So that's for node 1. Let's do similar thing for node 2 as well. Oops. Okay, node 1 is done. Let's add to node 2. Okay. So the nick cards are added to nodes. Now let's see. Okay, the Iscsi target installation is complete. Now we will add one more nick card to the domain controller as well, so that it can present the Iscsi to both the nodes. Okay, that's done. Let's assign IP address to Iscsi nick cards on all three servers. Before that, we will disable the firewall on all three servers. So firewall is turned off to avoid any kind of communication issues between three servers. Now we will assign IP addresses. I'll use 10 series IP addresses for Iscsi. 10.0.0.10. I don't need any gateway here. So that's the IP. So that's IP for node 1. Okay, IP addresses, Iscsi IP addresses are assigned. Let's see if they are reachable from the domain controller. This is the self IP address. 15, that's node 1. And 20, that's node 2. Okay, so Iscsi IP addresses are configured properly. Let's configure the targets. Again, I'll go to server manager. Okay, file and share. So I'll add new virtual Iscsi disk. So I'll configure the first quorum or witness disk there. So let's set the size as 1 GB and let's set it to dynamically expand. Next, now I'll select new Iscsi target because we don't have any already existing Iscsi target. Next, I'll set the name as node 1 server access. Now I'll add the IP address, the Iscsi IP address of node 1, that's 10.0.0.15. Okay, so that's the one. Then I'll add IP address of node 2 as well because we need to present it to both the nodes. 10.0.0.20. Next, we don't need any chap. Create. Okay, that's done. So we have created one disk, that's quorum. So those are the IP address 10.0.0.15 and 10.0.0.20. So we will add one more disk, new Iscsi disk. Next, so let's name this as SQL disk. Let's make it 5 GB. Again, dynamically expanding. So we can assign the existing targets itself. Create. So we have two disks. Okay, this is done. Now on nodes, we will configure Iscsi Initiator. So for that, we'll go to run and type Iscsi CPL. So yes, same on node 2. Okay, so we'll add the target IP, that's target IP of the domain controller, that's 10.0.0.10. Quick connect, and we can see the connection. The target is there and it shows the status as connected. Now if we see the volumes, we can see the two disks. One will be of 1 GB and the other will be of 5 GB that we have created and presented here. Same thing with node 2. 10.0.0.10. Quick connect. Sorry. So got disconnected, again config, and we have those two disks. Now if I go to disk manager, here I can see the two disks. One is of 1 GB and the other is of 5 GB. Both are the Iscsi disks that are presented from the domain controller, that is the storage server. So let's see on node 2 as well. So here also we can see the same disk. So let's go on node 1 and first bring them online and configure them. Initialize disk. I'll initialize as MBR because they are just 1 GB and 5 GB each. So need not to worry about GPT disks. So now I'll create a simple volume, and because it is a witness disk, for simplicity or identification, I'll give a drive letter as Q. Similarly, I'll format it. Let's give it G drive. Now I'll do the same thing on node 2, although on node 2 I don't need to give them format them. We will just need to give them the drive letter. So before that, let's take it offline from here and then do a refresh. And take them online here on node 1, sorry, node 2. So now by default it gives the next available drive letter, so we will have to change those drive letters. Go to properties for 1 GB, sorry, change drive letters and path, change, we will set it to Q, and for 5 GB disk we will set it to G. So storage part of the cluster is done. Now we will assign the heartbeat IP address to the NIC, the other NIC that we have added. So for this we will use 176 series IP address, 172.16.0.15. Again, we don't need any gateway or DNS. Same way node 2. Properties IP 172.16.0.20. That's it. Now we will add the failover cluster feature in both the nodes. Okay, we already have server manager over here. Okay, so go to manage, add roles and features. Again, role based feature installation, the local server, to next, failover clustering, add all the required features, next, install. Same thing on node 2, manage, add roles and features, next, 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 failover clustering, add features, next, install. So let's wait for the installation to complete. Okay, installation is complete on node 1 and node 2 it is about to complete, and we will have to restart them. So let's restart. So let's wait for the nodes to get restarted. Okay, now both the nodes are back up. Now we will configure the cluster. Okay, so as we are logged in as domain admin, we don't need to worry about all the permissions and other issues. Being the domain admin, we have the full rights in the domain. So let's run clvadmin.msc, that's cluster administration console. Okay, so now we will create the cluster. Just right click on Failover cluster manager and select create cluster. Next. Okay, we will have to add both the nodes here. So we will add both the nodes. Next. Okay, frankly I can skip all the tests, but let's do all the tests to get the cluster validated, so that we can make sure that all prerequisites are met and the cluster configuration won't fail. So this cluster wizards does all kind of testings, be it storage, be it network, be it the drivers. There are multiple tests that it does, and after the tests are done, it will give a nice report. So let's wait for the tests to complete. Okay, all tests are done. It seems we got success on every test. Let's see the report. Okay, so here is we have the report: integrity, inventory success, network success, storage success, system configuration success. So everything is green. So we can proceed with cluster configuration. So we will assign some cluster name. Test cluster 1, that's the name, and we will give some IP address. That's, let's say, 25 192.168.80.25. Next. So let's add both the disks as cluster disks. Okay, we have successfully completed the cluster configuration. So here is our cluster, test cluster 1. Now let's see whether it has taken the correct disk as witness disk. Okay, so it has already taken the correct disk as witness disk. That's Q. We can configure the witness disk. Just right click the cluster, more action, configure cluster quorum setting. Next. So use default quorum configuration. Oops, sorry. Action, configure, select quorum witness. Now we have multiple quorum witness option, disk, share, and other witnesses, but we will go for disk witness, and here we can select our witness disk from available disk. Now we have added two disks. One is of 1 GB, that is Q, and the other one is of 5 GB. So we want witness disk to be the 1 GB disk, so which is already selected, so no issues. That's it. So this is how the cluster is configured. We can move the cluster from one node to another node. So let's try to fail it over. Currently it is on node 1. So right click, more action, move cluster resource, select node, say node 2. Okay, so if we go here, so we can see both resources are now online on node 2. So this is how cluster is configured. Thanks for watching the video.